whole new locale. Jay here in North Carolina, and we're at the Carolina Beach. It's called the Carolina Beach. Yeah, it's a well-known place to come swimming. You can see the dunes over on this side, and as we pan around to the left, you can see the swimmers back here. Almost as far as you can see, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sand. Coming around over here to the waves. There at the Atlantic Ocean. Heading on over, further over to the left, you can see some surfers out there coming in on the waves. And if you were to go in that direction, straight out there, that would be Britain on the other side. Over this direction would be Spain. But I'm here to talk about something that's just come up in the news. Back on the 18th of July, BBC came out with a spectacular news, what they thought was newsworthy, the oldest mosque ever found in Israel. 1,200-year-old mosque, and it was out all over the pages there for BBC on the internet. And I've been getting all kinds of calls from people and Muslims as well who are saying, see, this proves that Dan Gibson is wrong, that your whole theory about the mosques facing Petra is incorrect, because this mosque, found 1,200 years ago in the 7th century, according to the journalist who wrote the article, this mosque is facing Mecca. 7th century, 636, 7th century. Well, I wanted to see what was going on, and so I quickly went up online. I went to this, to the story. Dear me, whoever wrote the article, for number one, BBC are not experts on qiblas. They are not experts on direction of prayers of any mosque. And you can see very clearly that this particular article written by this journalist, whatever the journalist's name is, had not done their homework. First of all, look at the title. Here's the title. 1,200-year-old mosque. Now, we're in 2019. If it's 1,200 years old, that would put it to 819 AD. 819 is the 9th century. But in the article, then they say this is one of the earliest mosques that is taken from the 7th or 8th century. 1,200 years is not 7th or 8th century, so already between the title and the internal writing of the article, the journalist has already contradicted themselves. But then that's what journalists do. I don't think if you don't know what you're talking about, you'll make all kinds of claim, any kind of claim. But I wanted to find out from Dan Gibson what he felt about this, because this is a brand new mosque. It's just been uncovered this year, and so it's a small little mosque. And here's a picture of the mosque. Take a look how small it is. It's nothing more than a village mosque, a peasant's mosque. These are farmers who created this mosque. This is not a great big mosque. This is not a standard mosque. This is not a urban mosque. This is not one of the great mosques that Dan Gibson's been looking at. But there are many problems with this article. First and foremost, and Dan pointed this out to me, take a look. It has a mihrab that you can see. In fact, here's a picture of one of the workers actually praying in the mihrab. There are 3 workers here. One of them is praying in the mihrab. What is a mihrab? What a mihrab is a niche that's put into the Qibla wall that was borrowed from the Christians. This was something that was created after 705. It was the first mihrab ever used on any mosque is 705. That is 8th century. So already you can see that this cannot be 7th century by virtue of the fact that it has a well-defined mihrab. The fact that it's so well-defined that it takes up so much of the wall means that this is a much more standard mihrab, which would have probably make it either late 8th century or early 9th century. That would then support the 1,200 years ago. But more than that, when you want to look and ask whether or not this is facing Mecca, they just said it's facing Mecca. Listen, folks, take a look at this map. Here is a map of Rahat. Rahat is where this mosque is at. Look at where Rahat is, and take a look where Mecca is, and take a look where Petra is. This mosque is facing either Petra or Mecca. It could be facing either one of them. You cannot make a statement like that unless you look at the coordinates. This is something the Muslims have been upset with Dan Gibson. They're saying he doesn't look at the coordinates. Dan Gibson is the only one that has looked at the coordinates. You've got to use imaging. You've got to use spectrography. You've got to use satellite technology to see where the coordinates are to get the accuracy of where this is actually facing. But even more than that, this is a peasant mosque. They didn't have spectrography back in the 8th and 9th century. All they had were stars to look at, and peasants, I would imagine, would face it anywhere that's south or that's southeast. In this case, the mihrab of this mosque, without even looking at coordinates, because no coordinates have been given, they've only just discovered this mosque, it could be facing both Petra or Mecca. So what do? You look at other mosques that are well known from Israel, and there are 4 mosques that predate 819 that we know of, that Dan has been to, who has gotten the coordinates. He's physically been there. Let me just name them to you, and we'll picture them as we go through them. The first and most important is the Dome of the Rock. It's not a mosque, but it is the 3rd most holy shrine in Islam. Look at the date it was built, 690. That is 7th century. Look and see where its mihrab is. Look and see where it's facing. It is facing Petra, not Mecca. Dan Gibson has found that out. Go look at his book. You will see he's got the coordinates there. The Kirbat al-Minya Mosque is another Israeli mosque. That is dated 706, early 8th century. It is facing Petra, not Mecca. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, that is a very famous mosque, one of the most famous mosques. It is also on the same citadel that the Dome of the Rock is. It's on the southern portico. You can see it there with the Dome of the Rock behind it. That was built 709, early 8th century. It is facing uniquely Petra, not Mecca. And then the other famous one is the Kirbat al-Mafjar Mosque, which we have pictured here. Look at the date, 714. It also is 8th century. It is in Jericho. It is facing Petra. So the 4 earlier mosques that are much earlier than this one in Rahat, which is 9th century, are all facing Petra. So when would they start facing Mecca? Well, the first mosque that faced Mecca is this one here, and that is known as the Banbor Mosque that is in Pakistan. The date for that is 727. Now we're moving into the 8th century. We're about 100 years after the mosque, supposedly, according to Islamic tradition, was canonized in 621 or 624. This is 727. Over 100 years later, the first mosque we can find anywhere in the world that is facing Mecca. Now, from the time that the Abbasids take over, and they take over in 749 to 750, all the mosques then begin to face Mecca. Every one of the mosques would be facing Mecca. By the 9th century, all the mosques begin facing Mecca. This mosque that we're looking at, that BBC has highlighted, is from 819. There's no story here. Of course mosques were facing Mecca by 819. If this mosque is facing Mecca, it could easily just as well be facing Petra. But can you see where BBC has run with this story? And the reason why the Muslims got confused is because of one statement in the middle, at the very end of that article, which mentions that the Muslims only arrived in Israel in 636 AD. The Muslims grabbed that statement and said, so this mosque must be that date. No, this mosque is not that date. Look and read it again. That's when Islam first arrived in Israel, which makes sense. That they did arrive in Israel after Muhammad died. Only then did they finally get up that far north. So it stands to reason that if you're going to read that sentence, for heaven's sakes, read it correctly. And don't therefore say that this mosque is therefore from that date. No. This mosque we're looking at is probably from the 9th century, possibly 819. We won't know until they do more studies. All they have done is found an outline of a very small mosque from a peasant village. They're claiming it's 1200 years ago. If that's the case, that's from the 9th century. There's no story here. Of course the mosque in the 9th century, even in the 8th century, they were facing Mecca by 727. So Muslims, calm down. This is not at all confronting what Dan Gibson is saying. Dan Gibson still holds strong to his view that the mosques only begin to start facing Mecca in 727. Then as from 749 on, once the Abbasids take over, then most all the mosques that are being built would be facing Mecca. It stands to reason by the 9th century, all the mosques are then facing Mecca. Good. Well, I hope that's calmed you down. I hope that eradicates any type of anger by the Muslims that somehow Dan's got it wrong. Dan Gibson will be going to that mosque. He will be getting the coordinates. This is brand new. He's going to be in Israel. Once we get the coordinates of that mosque, then we will be able to solidify what we already know. Good. Good to be with you here in North Carolina, looking out towards the Atlantic Ocean over this side with all these beach lovers here. Love to get into the water ourselves. This is Jay then, heading back to home, but it's been fun being at the beach. Over and out.